name is Keith Harris, and I'm with Bedard Controls. Hopefully you can see my screen. We will be recording this today so that it can be used in the future. And the topic today is a BACnet IP Wi-Fi connected thermostat that we're deploying throughout the city of Fresno as part of the conservation phase 2 project, or energy conservation phase 2 project that's been ongoing for some time. So our agenda today is, I'll give you a little background about Bedard Controls.
Are you currently sharing? Sorry.
I should be. Do you see my?
I see it.
Okay, sorry.
Anybody else having difficulties? Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the project itself. We'll talk about the project's purpose. We'll talk about some terminology that we use that will help when we're communicating back and forth. We'll talk about why we selected this piece of equipment or why it was selected. We'll give you a little background on what we do when we come to your site in terms of installing it. We'll talk about what we refer to as set points. And then we will talk about schedules and instructions. And then finally, if you have any questions. This training, we've provided this training once before for your colleagues in the fire department. And so it takes, maybe 20 minutes. It's not too long. So with that, hopefully everybody can hear me, everybody can see my screen, and we'll move forward from there. Okay. Like I said, my name is Keith Harris. I'm with Bedard Controls. We're located in Clovis. We've been in business since 1997, and we install what is referred to as Johnson Controls or Johnson Controls Metasys, either an EMS system, which is an energy management system, or a building management system, a BMS. And we do that for the city of Fresno at a lot of your various sites. City Hall, the old Fresno B building we just did Dickey Youth. We're doing some work at the Fax buildings. But generally, we provide the, if you will, the building control management system for the city. Other areas that we provide controls to: Valley Children's, Kaiser, VA hospitals, County of Fresno, the zoo, which is kind of interesting, Fresno Pacific, and a number of smaller rural school districts. My background is mechanical engineering. I've been with Bedard for about plus 5 years. I went to Fresno State. I hate to mention how long ago, but I've been doing pumps and HVAC for the last 35, seems like a lifetime, the last 35 years. I'm also actively involved in the local ASHRAE chapter, which is the Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers, that meets here locally. The project is really designed to help the city save energy. And I don't know if this is taken directly off of the city's website, but you folks received an honorable mention award not too long ago for trying to do energy conservation and energy reduction. One of those measures, as we call them, was to install HVAC thermostats and upgrade systems to be more efficient. The HVAC thermostats save energy by two means. One is not running the unit when no one's occupying the space, and we'll talk more about those terms, but also adjusting set points so that we're not cooling or is heating as hot or as cold as in the past. The other thing that has come up is everyone has asked me, where is solar and battery storage? And it looks like, according to this, the city will have some 18 sites sometime in the near future with solar and battery storage. So we're in phase 2. Phase 1 was a collection of measures that we weren't too involved in, but phase 2 is primarily HVAC and HVAC thermostats. Some industry terminologies, just so we're kind of talking the same language. When we refer to a space, we're talking about an air-conditioned area or a conditioned area. It doesn't have to be air-conditioned, but just a conditioned area, meaning we're heating and cooling it, that's served by a single piece of equipment. So when we talk, we talk about spaces. That's really the area or the zone in which you are getting heating and cooling to from a piece of equipment. We also talk about occupied and unoccupied. Now, this is a little bit different than the terminology you might use if you have a smart thermostat in your home. Usually that's home and away. It's very similar, but we talk occupied and unoccupied. We're talking about a space that's going to be expected to be inhabited on a regular basis that we can create a schedule around. And then that same space, when it's unoccupied, we can create a schedule around. And that's really where we anticipate most of the energy savings coming, not running the equipment at times when no one is in the space, and also reducing the amount of heating and cooling going into that space when someone's not expected to be there. So we'll use the term occupied and unoccupied. Typically in the parks world, I would think the occupied would be your normal business or open hours, and unoccupied would be after that. Now, typically, we don't turn off the equipment when unoccupied for a variety of reasons. We typically do what we call a setback, and a setback is a departure from the temperature set point that we want to maintain in the space when it's occupied. So we have a temperature that we want to maintain when we think people or occupants are in the space. Then we have a setback that is a temperature either higher in cooling or lower in heating that we allow the space to drift to when we expect no one to be occupying that space. So we'll talk about set points and we'll talk about setbacks, and the two are used in regards to the unoccupied and the occupied times. So the purpose of this project really was monetary savings, but there's also the additional reduction of carbon footprint. And it's really, and I think Mayor Dyer had a press conference a few months ago where he was quite concerned that PG&E was proposing a 35% price increase. So since that time, this project has taken on a little greater importance, just trying to offset the cost increases that the city might be experiencing with PG&E raising their rates. The typical techniques to do that is really, first of all, scheduling, trying to schedule the space to be occupied during times when people are going to be in the space, and then trying to schedule the space during unoccupied times. The second is setbacks. So we make a small temperature adjustment when it's unoccupied. Either we allow it to get a little warmer or we allow it to get a little cooler, but typically we don't turn off the equipment completely. We don't want the building to get too hot and we don't want the building to get too cold for freeze protection. So we just change the set point through the setback to a little less comfortable condition. And then the third is set point control, meaning you can only allow it to cool or heat the space to certain temperatures. And that's not the primary purpose of the project, is not set point control. It's really to schedule the projects or schedule the spaces, then use setbacks to save some energy when not occupied. And third is to control the set point or the comfort level in the space. Okay. We proposed this project several years ago to the city, and then under the energy conservation projects that have been brought by the sustainability people, this project got picked up. So it's a wall-mounted thermostat, for lack of a better description, very similar that you could use in your home, but it's designed for commercial applications. What's unique about it is that communicates back through what we call a backnet IP protocol, meaning it actually talks back to a server that's located at City Hall or a virtual server someplace that allows us to collect data and transmit data back and forth between the thermostat, which controls the equipment, and the person interfacing with the EMS or BMS system. We do that through the infrastructure that's already in place, which is the Wi-Fi networks at most of the city's facilities. And we do that through a sub-routing technique where we bring in data to the Wi-Fi through the access point, and I have a little diagram to show you. Then it's sub-routed by your IT department back to our server, and then the people who are in charge of maintaining the HVAC equipment, providing the schedules, those types of things, can access the thermostats remotely. So the reason this was selected is it's a low-cost alternative to a full building management system, and it works nicely when we have what we refer to as rooftop package units or rooftop split units, and we are basically turning those on and off based on the set point and the schedule. So what we do is we take off the existing thermostat, and we have a technician doing that as we speak. We take off the existing thermostat and we replace it with this one that you see in the picture. It then connects to your Wi-Fi network, much like a smart thermostat would be in your home. But instead of sending out to a cloud or a portal, it sends it through the city's IP network back to a server, and then your facilities people or other people can access it directly. The nice thing about that, all the data remains local. There's no cloud involvement, so there's a better or higher level of security. That data can be backed up and taken care of, and we're not going out to the cloud to deposit data and then someone accessing the cloud. So this is kind of how it works. We replace the existing thermostat with the BACnet IP thermostat. We then connect it to the existing Wi-Fi network at the site. That Wi-Fi network then talks to what we refer to as a Metasys engine or supervisory controller. And then that supervisory controller talks to a server that allows people to remotely access the data through credentialed login. Right now, the facilities people are the people who are able to log in, but that can be expanded as necessary. The idea is we don't have to change this wiring here. I hesitate a moment because in a lot of cases, you'll notice there's 5 wires that we need to communicate. A lot of times there's only 4 wires, especially in some of the older buildings. So we have to use what we call an add wire that kind of pretends to be a 5th wire so that we have constant power to the new thermostat because it's broadcasting on a regular basis back through the Wi-Fi network. So you'll see a lot of thermostats look very similar to this Honeywell one that's there. We take that off the wall. If we need to, we add an add wire, which is a wiring process that we get up into the equipment and add a electronic device, and it communicates across 1 wire instead of 2. And then we mount this thermostat connected to the Wi-Fi network. If you notice, there is a unique Wi-Fi network at each site, which is called COF HVAC. That's our network that was set up by the your IT department. So we connect to that one. We're not on guest and we're not on employee and the few others that are available. We have our own, and then it gets sub-routed internally back to an engine and back to the server. Okay, this is what all the thermostats does and all the displays. And I'm just going to go through a few of them, and hopefully you can see my cursor as I move around. But starting up in the upper left-hand corner, The snowflake means that it's in cooling, meaning it's attempting to cool the space to the set point that we've set in the schedule. This rising steam icon means it's in heating. So we are going to either be in cooling or heating, and the way it's set up is it'll auto change between the two based on the temperatures that it's setting. The other icon, the wind icon, we don't use too much. That's a ventilation mode, but you'll see that come on occasionally. The working icon means that it's told the equipment to come on. The mode button is important. It allows the change between heating, cooling, and ventilation. We've automated that, so it'll change between heating and cooling depending on what temperature it sends. The fan button's the same way. In your application, the supply fan is always running when occupied because it's a commercial space. The two buttons that are probably the most important are the up and down buttons. Those allow you to change the temperature up or down as low as the pre-described set points for that type of activity. So in cooling, you can go down to 74 degrees, and in heating, you can go up to 68 degrees. The set button is also important because that button, if you should come in when the space is unoccupied and you want it to be either to start to heat or cool because you're going to be there for a while, you hit the set button and it'll change it from unoccupied to occupied. We've also just recently opened up, you can actually just turn off the unit. We don't necessarily recommend that, but some people feel more comfortable just having the unit not running. The other one down here, we're not measuring humidity, so you won't see anything there. The DP disappears as soon as we actively connect it. The moon and the sun icons indicate that it's in an unoccupied or occupied mode. So you should see those depending on what the schedule is for that particular time of day for that space. The 1 and 2 icons refer to how many stages of cooling and heating. In most cases, we only have one stage of cooling and one of heating. Some of the larger units have 2 of cooling. If it's available, we hook it up, but we don't most of the smaller package units only have 1 of each. And then this center display is the actual temperature, and we have it read in Fahrenheit. So it should read somewhere around 70 degrees, 72, 74 on a regular basis. Okay, like I mentioned before, the set points that have been described for this project that are being programmed into the thermostat and into the system is a set point in cooling mode, meaning air conditioning, down to 74 degrees. Now you can be anything above 74 degrees that you would like, but you can't go currently below 74 degrees, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. In heating, right now it's 68 degrees or anything less than 68 degrees. So if it's in heating mode, you'll get the rising steam icon. You'll be able to use the up and down arrows to the point where you get to 68 degrees and then it'll stop, but you could be less. And some of your colleagues in other buildings like it cooler than that. But those are the 2 set points that were set up for this particular project. Now, I bring that up because set points are something that were placed into the project so that it could model the energy savings that would be achieved. But set points are a variable depending on how that space is being used and the importance of that space to keep its occupants as comfortable as possible. So 74 and 68 are what's in the model. That predicts the energy savings that could be available. That's what paid for the thermostats to be installed. That's what paid for the new equipment to be installed at various sites. But again, if those set points are not acceptable, either because of the architecture of the building or the use of the building, those set points can be changed in the future to more closely fit what is required for that particular space. That same thing goes for the schedule. Right now, well, let me finish this. So in unoccupied mode, that space will go up to about 80 degrees, meaning we're going to go from 74 up to 80 during the unoccupied period of time, and then we'll go down to about 55 degrees. Again, we don't like to turn off the unit completely to make sure that there's freeze protection in place. And so we go down to 55 degrees. An exterior wall could be colder than that. So, but we want to keep the exterior walls above 32 so that we don't have any broken pipes and those types of things from freezing. So set points are set, and that's how the energy savings has been predicted or modeled. Again, they can be changed based on the requirement of that space. The occupied hours for the parks, we're going to be setting those up basically on your normal business hours when you are normally open. And then the unoccupied hours are everything else. One thing I mentioned earlier is because they are commercial buildings by code, the supply fan, the fan that moves the air around in the space, is supposed to run continuously. That's probably different than what you're experiencing currently, because most of the thermostats we've run into are more of a residential style, meaning they only run the supply fan when they're in call or they're calling for heating or cooling. Because this is a commercial space, because the code requires that we run the fan continuously, we run it when it's occupied. So the fan will be running even though there isn't a call for heating or cooling, and that's to get better circulation and better filtration of the air. It's not a bad idea in our era of COVID, but it is probably a difference from how the building's currently being operated. So a lot of times, because it's not hot air, it's not cold air, you may think the equipment's not running. The equipment will turn on the heating or cooling as required to maintain the set point in the space, but the fan will continue to run continuously during occupied hours. Okay, so this is the instruction sheet that we're leaving behind. We're trying to put one with every thermostat unless they're really closely gathered together, then we put one. It kind of gives you the key icons, the snowflake, the rising steam, the working icon, the unoccupied icon, the occupied icon. The two buttons you want to be most interested in are changing the temperature up and down and the set point. We've recently, this button down here, which is the on-off button, we've opened that up so that you can actually just turn off the unit. If you want to change the temperature, you can raise the temperature or lower the temperature to the set points for that type of operation. And if you want to change the mode, meaning you want to go from unoccupied to occupied, then you hit the set button. And again, one of these sheets are laminated and put with each thermostat on the wall. We don't anticipate they remaining forever, but they're there to help people better understand how to operate the unit or operate the thermostat in the short term. And again, the fan will run when scheduled to be occupied. So you'll feel air moving, even though it may not be hot or cold, because it's circulating the air in the space. Okay, this is a installation we did last week at one of the park sites. So you can see here's our instruction sheet. I bring this up for two reasons. One is we're trying to label each thermostat with a unique identifier, usually using the park name and then the equipment number. So this is Mary Ellen Brown AC-5. If you have any issues, it's really helpful if you tell us that information so that we can track it down in our system. But also, a lot of the older systems had a mechanical timer, or what we refer to as a bypass timer. We are typically removing that and putting a cover plate on there because the occupied, unoccupied mode through the set button does the same thing as this occupied mechanical timer used to do. So you'll see sometimes a faceplate, a blank faceplate where that timer used to be. In most cases, they're not hooked up anymore, but we're trying to clean it up and make it look a little nicer. But the unoccupied and occupied function that mechanical timer provided is now done through the set button. We're also trying to cover up with what we refer to as a beauty plate or a back plate so that you don't see the exposed wall. Can't always do that depending on the size of the other thermostat, but in most cases we're adding this beauty plate to try to make it look as attractive as possible. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions or comments, concerns, and then we can conclude from there.
This is Kyle. I'm in Area A with Parks.
Yes, sir.
Who do we email to request an evaluation on the architecture for changing of the set point?
I think for the parks, you would contact Summer.
Summer, okay.
Yeah. Right now, we're kind of we're trying to finish up this project, and we want to kind of get everything in working order the way the contract has been written. But I think in the longer term, there'll be a person at parks, there'll be a person at police, and person at fire that will have access to change not only the set points, but also change schedules to fit your particular site. So if you have a different schedule or you're expecting to be a cooling center, you need to run longer hours. We don't anticipate you needing to call us. There should be someone available who could reschedule the space or change set points. And so we're working with the facilities people to find that person that's a little closer to your operations than the facilities people.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions? I know I went through it kind of quickly, but I didn't want to use up too much of your time. If we haven't been to your site, typically we come about 8 o'clock on a Tuesday or Thursday. There's two of us to start, and then Greg, our technician, finishes the installations. After that point, then we come back and we do some programming and whatnot inside of the Medicine system. And eventually, as that project gets closed, then it'll be turned over to facilities or someone within your particular area for control and modifications. If you're experiencing problems with the thermostat, generally we are finding, in fact, last night, that most of the issues that we're experiencing aren't necessarily related to the thermostat directly. They're related to the equipment. So we've been asking people to contact facilities to confirm that the equipment is functioning correctly. And if it's a thermostat issue, then we send out our technician to make adjustments. But we were out at a site yesterday, and the issues were not related to the thermostat. The issues were related to the equipment. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Well, with that, you're welcome to email me at a later time. My email address is keith@bedardcontrols.com, and I'll be glad to try to help you I can within the parameters of our scope of work. But if you have any concerns about how it operates, let me know. We have people who can provide some additional training. I'll send out the link to this training shortly, and you can share it with the other people in your area. But in general, it's a fairly straightforward piece of equipment if you're familiar with residential thermostats.
Thank
Well,
you very
thank you.
much.
You bet. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And if there's any issues, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Keith.
you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.